Bunch of people from Peconic Landing. I see some familiar names and faces. I am not going to be calling anybody out at any point in time, but if you want to raise your hand, Linda and her amazing team are also monitoring and helping out with this. So I'm going to keep this pretty informal. I decided not to do a PowerPoint presentation. I thought that that would actually stop people from asking questions, but we'll go from there. I will look for raised hands. And Linda, you and your team are welcome to jump in whenever you want to, okay? So nice to meet you and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Alison.
So I'm going to jump right in. I want to talk a little bit about just definitions, very, very basic definitions. I want to start with the difference between worry, anxiety, and stress. That was one of the questions that one of you guys sent in. Brilliant question. And it's a little confusing. So worry is actually, number one, a verb. It has to do with our own thought process inside our head. So the sentences that we actually say, either that we recognize or don't recognize. So there are a lot of times that we have worrisome thoughts in our mind and we're not even positive that they're there. They're so automatic, they're so instinctual. So I'm going to get back to that. But worry is actually a verb, right? Anxiety is a feeling. So a little bit different. It's something that comes as a result of a situation or a thought. So it may be anticipating something that you're doing. It may be an individual who causes you to feel unsettled. It may be anticipating something that's happening down the road, thinking about a decision that needs to be made, a place that you need to go, etc. So stress is actually an interpretation of all of the various factors that put pressure on us. So stress is the big picture that comes out of the feelings of anxiety, comes out of the worry that we have in our mind, and the various different demands that the world places on us. So a real life example is absolutely what we all just went through. Apparently I am coming in and out, so keep on letting me know. I'm not sure what to do about the bandwidth, but I will.
The verbal is fine.
The verbal is
fine.
good.
Yeah,
Okay,
very
if
clear.
I need to, theoretically, I can turn off the video if it's not helpful. But for the moment, I'd rather leave it on just so you guys are not listening to a talking head. But I'm going to turn off another device that I have and see if it boosts my power. So stress has to do with the balance between what we feel like we can give to the universe and what the universe theoretically is demanding of us. So let's go back to the situation that we were all just in a few moments ago. We're trying to set up this webinar and technology is impeding us, and the capacity to solve the problem that was in front of us was temporarily outside of the bounds of our abilities. So sometimes it's about powerlessness, sometimes it's about not having the tools that we need, but stress is the combination of having demands placed on us and not having the capacity or believing that we don't have the capacity to actually solve the problem that's in front of us. So Linda, I'm going to have you continue telling me if I should turn off my video, I will, if that's more clear. I don't want to be disruptive with people, but I also don't want to be a talking head. So I'm going to give you guys.
I can hear you clear now, Alison, so it's perfect.
It's better? Great. Okay, good. And again, everybody, we can see if anybody raises their hand or has a question or wants to talk. This is so much more fun when it's a dialogue, and there is no question that is silly or stupid. I guarantee you, I've been teaching for the last 25 years, And I can absolutely guarantee you that if you have a question in your mind, there's somebody else who is listening who has thought of the same question and is too shy to ask. So please jump in. This is way more fun as a dialogue. And I would also love to hear examples. Yes.
I don't know if my raise your hand is coming in, but I
see it.
I had
Go for it.
emailed you. I
Linda.
emailed you a question. Yeah, I emailed you a question, and your definitions actually are really helpful. So I'm not sure if the question was poised in the context of these definitions, but here's my question. So we all feel stress. We all feel incredible amounts of stress in the last 2 years, I'm sure. How does one, with this sense of powerlessness, because like you said, either you can't get out to do something you need to do because of COVID, or your internet's down. How do we break the cycle of stress, particularly as it relates to task-related stress? You know, I've got so many things to do, and I don't know where to start, and I feel like I'm behind. And if I take a break, then I'm going to be even more behind. So that's what I mean by the cycle of stress. So can you talk to that a little bit?
I absolutely can. And it's a fantastic question. And I'm going to give you two sides of an answer. Number one, we do have more power than we think we do. Now, the problem is once you start feeling stressed, it's a productive indicator that you are kind of over your skis. You've gotten yourself in over your head. Okay. Now, what I mean by that is if we all had the capacity to rewind and shorten the task list, that would be one way to reduce stress, correct?
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that sometimes we get ourselves overcommitted. So one of the things that I want to talk about is whether or not we are living by our values. And it's a big concept, but what it means is that when we examine our task list and when we think about all the demands that are placed on us, are we setting priorities that are aligned with our values and our capacity? So it's a really big concept and it's a really big answer. But the very first thing to do is when you look at your task list, number one, I want you to be realistic. So if you're now feeling stressed out, it indicates to me that chances are your task list is already too long. And by acknowledging that up front and deciding that you need to reorganize, it sends a signal to ourselves that we have to think differently, plan differently, organize differently. Because you're absolutely right. When there's too many things to do and not enough hours in the day and lots of universal obstacles, whether it's COVID, whether it's internet, whether it's family, whether it's feeling under the weather, the fact is that oftentimes we do literally, we bite off more than we can chew. And the problem with that is that we overcommit, we underdeliver, and we have created our own stress. So it's the question that you're asking is actually the crux of everything that we're going to do. Excuse me, let me get my water. I will be coming back to it, and I know that we haven't solved the problem, but I want to talk a little bit more about this issue, excuse me, of interpretation, okay? But I'm going to take a step backwards for 1 second. I want to talk about the physiology of stress and where it comes from. So stress is actually biologically necessary. And if we take a step back in time, I'm going to give everybody, excuse me, I don't know what's going on. I'm going to give everybody an example. that dates way back, okay? So I want everyone to imagine that we're back in caveman days. And the men have gone off like the good hunters that they are. And the women are back home, literally tending the fires, gathering berries, and taking care of the children. And I want you to imagine that while the men are out and about hunting, they encounter a lion. And I want you to understand very, very simply that the stress that the men feel, the physiological reaction to the sight of the lion, actually creates a series of responses in the body which are physiologically beneficial. What I mean by that is your heart rate goes up, your adrenaline goes up. The blood in your body rushes to the essential organs. And all of this is designed to help them run faster, hunt better, think more clearly, and physically, if there is an injury, particularly to an extremity, an arm or a leg, there is literally less blood in those parts of the body, which is protective and adaptive so that the hunters can actually hunt more safely and more effectively. Now, simultaneously, let's go back to our women that are tending the home fires, literally. Same lion comes wandering into camp, and the same physiological response, it heightens your awareness, your hearing gets sharper, your eyes get sharper, and the purpose of all of that is protective. The goal is to make human beings much more aware from a sensory standpoint so that you can actually assess danger in a better manner. So when we think about stress that way, I hope that you guys see that once upon a time, from an evolutionary standpoint, all of these physical experiences that we have were designed to make us more effective, more efficient, and so that we could either fight or flee, or the flip side of that for women is oftentimes tending and befriending, because you may not be able to flee if you're carrying 3 small children, but you still need to gather in a large group so that you're dissuading said lion from attacking. So you need to be on the ball, have your eyes on all the kids, make sure you create a big ruckus, and convince that lion that this is not the time or the place to actually attack. So let me stop there and see if there's any questions about what I'm talking about historically about what stress and anxiety do. Not seeing any hands going up.
So Allison, I just want to let you know that I've made everybody a panelist, and we do have submitted questions that we had, and I'm going through to see who's online, on the presentation. So Linda, thank you for your question. I know that Allison answered it. So I don't know if you want to wait till the end, Allison, to take these questions, or take questions as you're doing this unbelievable presentation.
No, we can certainly go. I'll take questions as we go, and anyone who wants to raise their hand. I do have the questions that were sent to me in advance. I don't know if there's more coming in now, but without questions right this second, additional ones, I'm going to go to questions in about 5 minutes. I have one more point that I want to make, because I want to flash us forward into the year 2020 so that all of us understand that right now what we're dealing with is obviously not a lion in camp. Now we have metaphorical lions that come into camp and cause us to be worried, anxious, and they create a sense of stress. But I want everyone to stop and think about an experience that I bet you everybody has had. So I want you to think about standing on a street corner. Maybe you're in the middle of New York City, maybe you're in the middle of Greenport, doesn't matter. You're standing on a street corner, you're about to step out into the crosswalk, You've already looked to the right and looked to the left. And just as you're about to go, a car comes whizzing around the corner and you jump back. So I want everyone to think about that physiological sensation of, oh my goodness. Phrase is, your heart is in your mouth. You can feel your adrenaline pumping. You're really nervous. That's the new lion in camp. So the world has changed and our physiological response hasn't changed. So now we have these new kinds of things that create stress and pressure for us. Now I'm going to generalize even more. So we all understand that the possibility of getting hit by a car, of course, that's anxiety producing. But all the other stressors that we have that are out there are now in our very social interconnected world, they've now become much more subtle. So let's go back to how we started our presentation today, okay? The capacity to not be able to provide the service that Eastern Long Island Hospital Foundation promised you. There's the potential for failure, right? There's the potential for social embarrassment. There's the potential frustration and disappointment that comes from feeling technologically stuck, that powerlessness we talked about. So what's happened now is all of those exact same physiological responses that date back in our evolutionary history, they still exist. I don't know about you guys, but I still get nervous if I'm walking into a room full of people. Let's talk about being a presenter on a Zoom call. Do I get nervous? Absolutely. Is there a rush? Is there a charge? Is there pressure that I place on myself to choose the words correctly, to speak slowly and clearly, right? Because if I don't do those things, the potential for quote unquote failure or danger being social in this particular example, it creates exactly the same sense of physiological stress, going back to our taxi cab whipping around the corner or the metaphorical lion, okay? So I'm still not seeing hands going up. I'm assuming everybody's cool on this and we understand the basic physiology that we're talking about with stress, right?
Right.
Okay. So the next thing, now Barbara, I hear you. Did you have a question or are you just clearing your throat?
Please excuse me, I'm always clearing my throat, but I think that was a wonderful example and it's very clear in my head. So go ahead.
Good, good. I'm glad, but for anyone, if it's not clear, jump in because I'm happy to try to clarify, but thank you, Barbara. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk about, and this goes back to Linda's question, which I think underlies everything that made us all come to this today. One of the things that's so important is that sometimes the situation itself is not actually the problem. In reality, it's our interpretation of the situation. And I can give you a great example that also was very recent, okay? I was driving, and I was actually driving to the airport, and I'm fairly organized, but I had not left exactly when I wanted to. So I was running just a little bit late, and I'm on the Long Island Expressway, and I'm stuck in traffic. Shocking concept, I know. Nobody's ever had that happen. So I am looking at the clock. I am at a dead standstill, and I am beginning to panic because I'm thinking I'm going to miss my flight. I am flying down to a business meeting, which is supposed to start at 5 o'clock. And if I miss my flight, I am going to be wildly embarrassed. I'm going to be annoyed with myself. I'm going to have to change and get on a later flight. I'm going to miss the 5 o'clock. That's going to be embarrassing. And my head is beginning to spin. I'm judging myself. I'm criticizing myself for not being more organized. And bit by bit, with the sentences that I am saying, all alone by myself in my car, I'm beating myself up. Alison, you should have left earlier. You knew that this could be a problem. We've all been in this situation, right? We are our own worst critics. Okay. My interpretation of the situation was panic, panic, panic. I'm going to miss my flight. All of a sudden, I started listening to the sentences that I was saying in my own brain. And I decided, hang on a second. Take a deep breath. Alison, have you ever missed a flight in your entire life? No. Alison, you left a few minutes late, but don't you always have time built in your planning? Yes. Alison, worst case scenario, you missed the flight. You're getting on a commuter flight. If you miss the 3 o'clock, you jump on the 4 o'clock. Is the world really going to stop spinning? Do people really care that much if I'm not there exactly at 5 o'clock for the cocktail portion of the dinner presentation? Will people even notice if I'm not there at 5 o'clock? Does everybody hear and feel the difference in the sentences that I'm saying inside my own head?
Yeah.
When I was able to reinterpret the situation as not catastrophic, my blood pressure came down. And then I figure, hey, I got an extra 15 minutes in the car. Why don't I use the time, call a friend, chit chat, relax, and enjoy my drive to the airport? Did the situation change? No. The only thing that changed was my interpretation. Linda, I see your hand up.
So very, very great interpretation, because I do have a washer machine and dryer on my second floor. And a friend of mine who is a plumber is like, why don't you ever use that? Why do you always use the one in the basement? And I said, because I'm afraid it will leak. And he turned around and said, well, then you fixed it. And I was like, that's so true. And I find that in life, what you just said, if you can talk your way through a stressful situation and it's not as bad as you think, you can really take down the level of stress. So thank you, Alison.
Yeah. And I want to go back to the outstanding question that I think frames the whole conversation that Linda started with, which is, when we have a list of tasks in front of us that is greater than we believe we can actually master, the first thing that's really important to do is take a look at our priorities and our capacity for the day. So there may be times and ways that we are able to reevaluate said task list, to analyze whether or not all of the items are as urgent as we thought that they originally were. Is there a timing factor? Now, I'm going to go back to Linda's example as we get to the last slide that I have. But again, interpretation and the evaluation. Part of what causes anxiety, the feeling of anxiety in our body, is the messages that we have in our mind. Now, one of the biggest problems is that some of these, the thoughts, I call them automatic thoughts. And I don't know about you, but I want everybody here with us. I want you all to imagine someone that you have known in your life who, for whatever reason, leaves you ill at ease. Someone who doesn't make you feel comfortable. It may be that they, they judge you. Maybe they're not nice to you, but for whatever reason, this is an individual that causes you some degree of discomfort. So you don't look forward to seeing them. And I want you to imagine that that person is coming up either on your cell phone, you see the name pop up, or you see an email coming in, or goodness forbid, you see this person walking down the hallway towards you. Maybe you see them on your caller ID, okay? The fact is that we have automatic messages that we give ourselves that oftentimes we don't even know that we have. And the sense of dread, the sense of powerlessness, the sense of frustration, oftentimes is so quiet in the back of our mind. I liken it to going to a baseball game, and on the bottom of the scoreboard, there's the ticker tape, and it exists for the whole game, right? So even if you're glancing up at the big screen, or if you're checking stocks, it's running all along the bottom, or if you're looking at the Weather Channel or CNN, they oftentimes have those messages that are running all the way along the bottom, but we can tune them out, right? We don't pay attention to them all the time until you realize, oh, well, they got to S. So now I'm wondering whether or not Southold schools are closed. Now I'm going to pay attention to it. These automatic thoughts that we have in our mind are much like the ticker tape that runs across the bottom of the screen. And you don't always pay attention to these automatic messages that we give ourselves, which can be incredibly problematic. So my real life example, I have my person in my mind, and I will absolutely say, when I see his name pop up on my phone, I would say that my blood pressure probably jumps up 10 points. There is no doubt about it. This is an individual who he's very quick to anger and very quick to blame. And my fear is that every single time I talk to him, that there is the possibility for my being acutely and clearly criticized. So the thoughts that happen in my head in that situation are absolutely automatic. And unless I make myself aware of the automatic worry that I feel, I don't have the capacity to change it and to replace it with that positive thought. So go back to my example of driving to the airport. I had to make myself aware, I had to catch myself giving myself panic-filled messages. So that's the very first thing that I want us all to think about as a coping strategy, which is awareness. And we're going to talk about meditation. And I'm not going to make everyone sit on pillows and go woo, woo, woo. Don't worry about that. But I am going to say that increased awareness, the capacity to think about what you're thinking about, we call it metacognition in psychology, thinking about what you're thinking, and being aware and being able to catch yourself and to change the self messages that you are giving is one of the things that's going to help everybody immediately to calm down. Okay. Now, the other thing I want to touch on here, a lot of you guys asked me questions about sleep. And this is where this concept is really, really important. When we are trying to go to sleep, and in probably the 20 to 30 minutes before trying to go to sleep, this concept of metacognition is super, super, super important, because one of the things that oftentimes impedes our ability to sleep is the fact that our mind becomes our own worst enemy. And without being able to think about what we're thinking about, we can't take charge of those thoughts, empty our brain, or replace our thoughts with something that's much more positive. So it's something that we trip over all day long, even when we're trying to sleep. So I want to get back to that, but I want to talk about some of the coping strategies and skills. But let me make sure that I'm checking in, and I want to know where we are. Okay, hang on. I have a whole bunch of different chats going on here. Let me check my chats. Looks like we're good. No other questions. Okay. So one of the things that's super duper important to remember, and this is situational, We are still in a global pandemic. So on top of everything else that is happening, even though things have gotten better, the fact is there is still residual insidious pressures that are contributing in many ways to our stress levels. And I say that because we're all trying to get back to normal. But the fact is that there is still a layer, a film that is creating anxiety for all of us, not knowing whether or not this was going to be live or whether it was going to be virtual, not knowing whether or not you can see your friends, your family, your loved one. This concept of wearing a mask and not being able to take a deep breath, all of these factors are still absolutely present. So I want you to think about carrying a load of bags. And every single morning right now, when we wake up, we already have one full, heavy bag with just the pandemic. It has not gone away. And in fact, in some ways, it's even worse because we are trying to function as normally as possible. And the allowances and permission that we gave ourselves and each other in the beginning are slowly going away. Okay. So I want to make sure that we touch on that and remind yourselves to be gentle with yourselves. Find the positive thoughts that you can give yourself. And again, Linda, this goes back to the task list. We all may need to cut ourselves some slack. Okay. So let's switch to solutions because I know that we've got about 15, 20 minutes late. Number one, I want people to think about the fact that honestly, the simplest strategy for managing stress, we can all do it. We can all do it anywhere and anytime. It is literally being able to breathe by taking deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth. I know it feels a little bit silly when I'm teaching children this. I literally say, smell the chocolate chip cookies as they're coming out of the oven. Breathing in through your nose and filling your lungs with that amazing smell of chocolate chip cookies. And then I want you to think about blowing on a hot bowl of soup. And thinking while you go through this, in with the good, out with the bad. In with the good, out with the bad. The simplest number one stress management technique is breathing. And I'm going to go back to the physiology of stress. You cannot biologically be stressed and calm at the same time. It's not possible physiologically because you have two different systems in your body, one that makes you stressed with adrenaline, one that calms you down. So by activating your own breath, super simple, you can do it everywhere, anytime. Other people don't need to know. You don't need to make it obvious. But it's the number one. Breath and breathing is the number one stress reliever in the universe. And we all have the power to do it and we control it. So going back to this concept of meditation, I want people to think about meditation in a somewhat different way. I want everyone to imagine that you're sitting in a beautiful park and it's a gorgeous day. You're sitting on a completely comfortable bench. And in front of you is a really beautiful fountain. You're looking at this gorgeous fountain. You can hear the water that is pouring out of this fountain. And I want you to think about taking 60 seconds to empty your mind of everything, empty it of absolutely everything. And I just want you to focus on the water in the fountain. Now, I would do an exercise with everybody, but I don't have faces, so I'm not going to make you guys do it with me. But I want you guys to imagine taking 60 seconds and becoming completely aware of nothing more exciting than your own breath. You can do it anywhere, anytime. and you will bring your own blood pressure down by so many points. Your cardiologist will love you. Okay, so that's the number one. And again, for all of the people that were asking me sleep questions, the capacity to, number one, become aware of the thoughts in your brain, take away the negative, worrisome thoughts in your brain. Think about it like a switch, turn them off, and simply start to breathe and be very, very active in trying to empty your brain. When those negative thoughts push in, you take the negative thought, you push it away gently, and you go back to thinking about your breathing. If you can do that for 15 to 20 deep breaths, the sense of calm that you are bringing to your own body. Now, it's easier said than done. I know it sounds super simple, and I'm not saying it is super simple. I know that this is work, but it is the number one capacity to fight off stress, okay? And remember, we're going back to the perception of pressure. That's what stress is. Linda, going back to your task list, it's this perception that everything on your task list is essential and must be done. Otherwise, you will have failed yourself or somebody else. So the perception of the mandates that we have on ourselves is part of what creates the nightmare. I just want to double check that we don't have any other questions. And I am watching the time. I know that we only have 10 minutes. Okay. So I want to go backwards, and I want to talk about some of the other strategies. I mentioned earlier that one of the things that was so important is to live by your values, okay? So what I mean by that is making sure that you are being actively reflective about the priorities that you have. And if you make certain that when you are setting your goals for the day, that your behavior actively reflects your priorities and your values. Oftentimes when we're out of balance, it's part of what creates the stress. Either we are living by other people's values, it may be pressure that are ideas being placed on us by friends, families, community, loved ones. When we are out of balance, the pressure that we feel is so much greater, okay? And I want to go back to some of the really basic eating and drinking healthily, okay? Sugar is not your friend. I want everyone to think about having little children around us who have just been given a soda and a bowl of ice cream, and it's Halloween and they're jacked up on sugar, okay? Sugar creates an energy that we do not necessarily control, and it affects the way that we think. It jazzes you. It's like a kind of upper, a caffeine. And having too much sugar in our body literally can trigger anxiety. So being very, very mindful about what we eat and drink, and not relying on bad food or bad drink to be stress reducers. So I need a glass of wine because I'm stressed. Well, it's not necessarily the healthiest way for us to manage the stress. A better way to think about it is, what is it that's stressing me out? How did I get myself into this situation today? And how can I get myself out of it tomorrow? Okay. Going back to this concept of exercise, it's about movement. It's about fresh air. And again, going back to this concept of breathing. When you are out going for a walk in the cold, you are automatically breathing. You are getting the fresh air. And just by going through that, you are going to end up feeling better because you are breathing, okay? When we talk about relaxation techniques, there's a whole army of different techniques that can be used. Most of them are, they require the user to be very intentional about setting time aside where you take control and try to mitigate the stress. So again, part of that just goes back to the taking control, whether you're taking control of negative thoughts in your mind, whether you're taking control of your breathing, whether you sign up for one of these apps on your phone or your iPad where you practice mindfulness. And again, I don't mean that people have to sit and meditate for 30 minutes. In fact, I don't recommend that you do that. I recommend maybe twice a day for 60 to 120 seconds. I just want people to stop and think. Maybe for 1, 2, if you're really good, 3 minutes, sit and think about your breathing. The purpose to relaxation techniques is being intentional. Doesn't matter whether you're sitting on the floor and stretching, whether you're taking a walk. It's about getting control over the negative thoughts that go running through our brain. I must do this. I have to be better. I haven't exercised today. I need to call my daughter. I have to get to work. I never did my grocery shopping. All of those things, the shoulds and the musts that we live with in our brain. If I don't do this thing, I am a less good person. We put those judgments on ourselves when we use those sentences. Becoming aware of them and replacing them with a more positive, permissive, friendly message to ourselves that says, hey, I'm doing the best that I can under the circumstances. Today may not be my best day, but I'm going to give myself a little bit of credit for the things that I've done right. Finding those positive sentences to replace the negative sentences is going to help to bring the stress down immeasurably, okay? And I'm going to go back to assertiveness, this capacity to recognize when we say yes to a demand that's placed on us by somebody else, and when we say no to a demand that's placed on us by somebody else. And this goes back to Linda's task list. How many times do we feel like we say yes to something? And it could be something positive. Somebody says, hey, would you like to get together for coffee? Would you like to meet to go for a walk? Would you like to talk on the phone? It doesn't matter. If you've said yes without paying attention to your values, your priorities, your schedule, it means that you have not been true to yourself. And those are the factors that are going to cause your stress to go up, up, up immediately, okay? And last but not least, we have to learn to set realistic, manageable goals. So Linda, again, going back to our task list, if we end up in a situation day after day after day, where we are feeling that we have a task list that is impossible for us to manage, impossible for us to get on top of, the message that we have to give ourselves is I am over promising. And the possibility that I will under deliver is giving me more stress. Therefore, we need to stop over promising. And that's our capacity to learn to say to ourselves, this is what I'm capable of, and this is what I'm not capable of. And unfortunately, we are the only ones who know where those pressure points are. So I want to stop there. I know that we just have 5 minutes left. I don't have any other hands up, but I just want to kind of get a feel. Have I answered questions? Have I helped you guys? I know I saw the sleep questions earlier. Go for it.
To me, yes, you have answered my question. A lot of useful information, certainly a lot of good, useful tactics, if you will. So yes, I would say yes.
Okay. No is also an acceptable answer. Do people have questions out there that I can help with? If I can't answer it in the next 5 minutes, I promise I will get back to you if there's ways that I can be more useful. So no is also a very acceptable answer.
I think that the breathing is a great tool, and I really appreciate it. And it helps me deal with other issues, with specific issues. Thank you, Allison. I think you've been wonderful. And I look
Good.
forward to our next chat.
Absolutely. I'm happy to do it. And I can do a whole session on mindfulness if people would like to, and ways that
Great.
you can practice being mindful, even when you're in a crowded room. I can teach you guys how to do mindfulness while you're standing in line at the grocery store.
That would be helpful. I would also ask of Linda Sweeney if ELIH continues, these are Stony Brook, to maybe give us a little bit more notice. I got the email yesterday and I happened to see it when I was, sort of commuting. So, because I think they are really helpful and I would love to participate going forward.
Thank you. And we would love to have suggestions from you guys about topics that are of interest. So we are trying to tailor this to the community needs. So if anybody has suggestions, even now while we've got Linda here, put them in the chat box. If there are things in particular that you would like, we are more than happy to try to tailor these sessions. And we did send this out. This has been blasted out for about 2 months. So we've got to check and make sure, Linda, that we have all the right contact information for you.
Oh,
Because
interesting.
these emails started going out at least a month ago, if not more. So let's double check and make sure that we have all the contact information so that it's all going to the right email.
Okay, I'll take a look at my history too. Maybe they were there and I just, you get so much stuff. Maybe I missed it. So
And then it may have gone to spam as well.
possible. Yeah, it's possible.
Okay, I just put my email in the chat. If anybody has any additional questions, I'm sorry, it is a hard stop at 12 o'clock.
Actually, Linda, will you put mine in there too?
de-stress.
There we
I'm
go.
sorry.
I was going to put I'll put mine in there too. Well,
Yes.
go ahead.
And thank you for all the feedback. If anybody has any additional feedback or any additional questions, Allison will put her email up and my email is up. And these are taped and on our website. So if you feel that anybody that you know should have viewed or listened to this, it will be up by the end of today, along with our other health outreach programs.
Linda,
There we go.
actually, there
Fine.
is somebody I'd like to have listened to this. One of my kids, I think, would benefit from this. They've had a trying work schedule. So where do you go on the website?
You go on, you'll see it once you get on, I believe. Oh, I hope we don't get cut off. It's under news and media,
Okay,
and then it says videos.
great. Thank you.
And please feel free to email us suggestions. We'd be happy to accommodate you. Linda and I are both worried that we will unceremoniously be cut off within the next 30 seconds. So we are saying goodbye and thank you to all of you, but please feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy if there's ways that we can tailor things specifically to be helpful. And if I didn't answer any questions, please email me and I'll get back to you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Bye,
Okay.
everybody.
Thanks, Linda, for all
Thank
your
you.
technical help. Bye.